that protects the copper from corrosion. So it will be thousands of years, literally, before the Statue of Liberty corrodes. It's going to outlive all of us and lots of generations behind us. So there was some talk a couple of years ago about cleaning the statue, getting that green verdigris off there, and they realized that that would be a silly idea because, first of all, everyone's used to the green by now. Second, it would cost about $50 to $60 million. Third, they would have to close the statue for at least a year to do that. And fourth, it would be green in 20 to 30 years again anyway. So, again, a great picture-taking opportunity, and let's move down here, and if anyone wants to lag behind for a moment and take some pictures, you're more than welcome to do that. Fairly crowded today. Again, if you can't hear me, and I'm sorry for interrupting any folks who are on the audio phones, but there are two men pictured here without whom there would be no Statue of Liberty. The first one is the guy on your left. His name is Edward de Lavallee. He's a Frenchman. He was a man who taught at the Sorbonne. He was an expert on the American Constitution. He was a big fan of the Declaration of Independence and American democracy and the way it worked. He was also an ardent abolitionist. So in 1865, when our Civil War brought slavery to an end as an institution, he gathered some friends and said, we should commemorate this occasion by giving the United States a gift. And the gift was some kind of monument. He didn't know exactly what it was going to be, but he had some ideas. So de Lavallee was the man who had the original idea for a statue. Not long after that, that idea came to the attention of our second guy, who is over there, and his name is Auguste Frederick Bartholdi. That's him right there. Young guy in his mid-30s, an artist with big dreams about doing big projects, about big ideas. And he originally wanted to do a huge monument at the opening to the Suez Canal. This is a drawing of what he proposed right there. And his idea was to put that at the opening of the Suez Canal. His inspiration was the Colossus of Rhodes, which was one of the wonders of the ancient world. Some of you may not be able to see the picture very well, but it doesn't matter because no one really knows what it looks like. It was destroyed in an earthquake in 226 BC. We don't really know what it looks like, but we do know it was about 100 feet high. So Bartholdi's idea was to build something even bigger than that. So when he heard about de Lavallee's idea, he took it and ran with it. At that time, the people on the French side of the ocean decided that they would try to start raising funds for it. So they put together a group called the Franco-American Union. And by 1871, they were able to send Bartholdi to the United States to promote the idea and also to start looking for locations. And it's like moving a battalion here, like I said. Come on down here. Bartholdi sailed through the Verrazano Narrows into New York Harbor, and he immediately saw Bedloe's Island, and he said, that's the place where my museum, my statue's got to be. Perfect location, New York Harbor, and he went back to France and started promoting the idea of doing it there, plus started working on the U.S. government to get permission to use Bedloe's Island as the place where the statue is going to be. So come on down here again. As inspiration, Bartholdi used two ideals. One was the ideal of liberty leading the people, very famous Delacroix painting from 1830 about the Second French Revolution. Very famous painting. That was one of his spiritual ideas or spiritual inspirations. The other was the Roman goddess of liberty named Libertas. She had been showing up in sculptures and on coins and in paintings ever since anyone could remember, a couple of centuries at least. This is her over here. So he combined those two ideas into what he hoped would become a statue representing liberty in New York Harbor. Now he started sending back drawings to the U.S. because by then a commission had formed called the Statue of Liberty Commission. And the idea was that they would raise the funds and do whatever was necessary to put the statue up in the U.S. And Bartholdi used as his studio model for the statue, his own girlfriend. She apparently was very attractive. She was like a supermodel. She was very well known in Paris as being an extremely gorgeous woman. So Bartholdi made some drawings and he made some statuettes, if you will, and sent them over to the United States. And The people in the U.S. looked at it and said, well, you know, Fred, she's very nice, but could you maybe send us something that looks more like the mother of our country than the girlfriend of our country? So he did. He said, you want somebody who looks more motherly? How about my mother? May I present to you Charlotte Bartholdi, the artist's mother, who is basically acknowledged as the face of the Statue of Liberty. Now, I had somebody on the tour a couple of weeks ago said, you know, she also looks a little bit like George Washington. And I thought, that's not a compliment. But in any case, here's a woman who, if she does look like George Washington, she not only looks like the mother of our country, but she looks like the father of our country, which is quite an accomplishment. So come on down. First of all, look on the right over here. And you see how the statue is actually held together. It's held together with rivets. This is the original color, and they've decided to bring her size 879 foot in here to show everybody. Now, somebody did a study of how big the statue's shoe would be. 879. And I don't know, probably a PhD for somebody figuring that out. But you look at that copper and you think, how did they form that in order to be able to rivet it together like that? That story happens down here. If you look at the picture on the wall, you can see Bartholdi's workshop in Paris. In fact, that's Bartholdi down there at the bottom, the guy without the hat on down at the bottom of the workshop. But they use a process called repoussé. Repoussé takes copper and fits it to the exact form of wood. And what they do is they would do a wooden model. That, for instance, is the hand of the statue, and it's holding the tablet that says July 4th, 1776. So they then take that, put plaster over it. You can see an example here, the ear. And then what they do is they bring it down to something like this. They put a box full of wood. You have to come down here to see how this works. But once they have the plaster frame, they take a box filled with wood panels, vertical wood panels, and they fit it over the part that they want to mold, and then they shave, sand, and shape the wood panels so that it fits exactly to the part that they want. And in this case, it would have been the fourth and the little toe, well, I guess it's 3 toes, of the statue. So once you've done that with that box of wood and shaped all of those panels to exactly what you want, you bring it to the next stage, turn it upside down, and then you put a copper sheet on top of it and hammer and pressurize the copper sheet until it fits exactly to the mold that you want. And that's how all the parts of the statue are formed. It's not molded, it's not melted copper and then placed in molds. It's using this repoussé process of wooden forms, templates if you will, that are molded or pounded exactly to the shape that they want. Okay? Any questions on that?
What they do with the forms?
That's interesting. Come on down here, I'll tell you about that. The question was, what did they do with the forms? They sold them to raise money for the statue, because this again was a gift of the French people to the American people, not the French government to the American government. So all along the way they had to raise money to make sure that the statue got built. One of the ways they raised money was they'd sell off parts of it after they no longer needed them. Parts like that, people used them for souvenirs. They had auctions, they had raffles, they had dinner parties in Bartholdi's workshop. He had about 60 people working in there. He'd bring people in for dinner parties and charge them for dinner parties. He would, as I said, raffle off or auction off pieces of the statue, things that had been used to build the statue. At several occasions, he ran out of money, so he had to go and get more money. Anything he could do. They were licensing the statue's image. They were doing everything they could. But on several occasions, they ran out of money, had to go raise more money, however they could, and then continue to work on the statue as it went along. So this was, again, a shot of Bartholdi's workshop. And one of the things he would do is he'd try to get wealthy people up inside the statue once he had it partly built. And then he'd try to twist their arm to give him a donation to help get the statue built. Okay? So, if you want to move down just a little bit, once they knew how they were going to form the statue's outer skin, they needed to figure out what they were going to do inside to hold the statue together. And for that they called on another one of the people that I mentioned you've probably heard of, but you didn't know he had any connection to the Statue of Liberty. His last name was Eiffel. as in Eiffel Tower. Hadn't even built the Eiffel Tower yet, but he was a well-known bridge builder in France, so Bartholdi called on him to figure out a way to make the statue stand up and withstand all the pressures that it would be subjected to in New York Harbor. So he came up with the idea of doing a vertical superstructure. They call it a pylon, and they connected that to the skin of the statue with iron and wood bars. And when they riveted the statue together, they'd take bars like the one you see behind you on the wall. Those would be connected to the bars connected to the superstructure, and then the rivets would go into those bars, and that's what would hold the skin together. So you can see, if you look in the lower left corner, you've got something that looks like a couple of toes on a foot. And that's how they held the statue together, was by riveting the different parts of the skin of the statue to bars like that. Okay, moving down here a little farther. So finally, the French have raised enough money, and they start building in a park in Paris, and they start in 1882. By summer of 1882, they've got it partially built. By the summer of 1883, they've got it almost built, and then finally, by the winter and spring of 1884, the statue is pretty much built. Now the problem is, how do you get it over to the United States? Ha! Now that's a problem. What they had to do is they built it in France, and once they knew they had overcome all the engineering challenges that were going with this thing, they pulled it apart, took it down, packed it into 319 pieces into 211 crates, put them on a special train, 70 cars long, and took them to a port where they were put on a ship and sent to the United States. Now, that was not the end of the story, because just as they had problems raising money in France, they had problems raising money for the statue in the United States, because the deal was France would do the statue, the United States would provide the pedestal, and nobody wanted to spend the money to provide the pedestal. They had some other objections too. A lot of people felt a religious objection. They said, we're a Christian country, you're putting a pagan goddess in our biggest port. No, we're not going to go for that. Other people said, she's just plain ugly. Why would we want her here? And then again, there was the money problem, because in 1873, there was a huge depression in the United States. People were having problems making it. And because they remembered what it was like, money was hard to come by because of that depression. In fact, the depression was called the Great Depression up until that one happened in the 1930s. It was the Panic of 1873. So for all those reasons and others, they said, we don't really want this thing. So it came to the United States, and while they tried to raise the money to put the pedestal beneath it, it sat for 11 months in New York, and they couldn't find the money to build the pedestal. So they had a little bit though. So come on down here. By the way, you might want to walk around the back of the statue and see what the superstructure looks like on the inside. Okay. Can all you guys hear me back there? Okay. They did get far enough along that they raised about $200,000 by 1884, but they were still short of their goal. They needed about another $100,000. But in the meantime, they were able to enlist an architect by the name of Richard Morris Hunt. He did some designs. He and Bartholdi got into some famous brouhahas about what the pedestal was going to look like. And finally, after going through a couple of different models, you can see them on the left here, they settled on this one. This is the pedestal over here on the far right that the statue sits on today. And you can see this balcony around here that all of you will have the opportunity to go up on later on. But this is what they settled on. But again, they were about $100,000 short. They needed a financial angel. The pedestal was partly built, but they ran out of money. They needed a financial angel, and they got one. On down here. And so we have the fourth of our people whose name you may be familiar with, or you may know what he's done, but you probably didn't know he had a connection to the Statue of Liberty. His name was Joseph Pulitzer. as in Pulitzer Prize. He was a newspaper publisher in the 1880s. He was in a crazy circulation battle with a fellow named William Randolph Hearst. Any of you who saw Citizen Kane, the movie, that was sort of a fictionalization of Randolph Hearst's life. But Joseph Pulitzer was an immigrant, came to the United States as a young man, impoverished, made a fortune in the publishing business. He ran the New York World, and he loved the idea of a Statue of Liberty. So what he said to his readers was, anyone who donates any amount of money, no matter how small, I will put your name in the New York World newspaper. And within 5 months, he had raised enough money to finish the pedestal for the statue, the final $100,000. And that's what pushed the statue over the top and made it possible for the pedestal to be finished after the statue had already come from France. And now it was time to build. There's another interesting story there. Come on down. This is a drawing of what the statue looked like under construction. You'll notice something a little odd there, right? All those guys hanging down from ropes, sitting on planks, riveting the statues together, riveting the statue together. The reason they had to do that is because of the small area of the pedestal, the base that they had to put the statue on, they couldn't really build a scaffold with 1886 technology that would have covered that high. So what they did was they built the superstructure on the pedestal, and then they built the skin around the superstructure using men hanging from the top of the superstructure on ropes, sitting on planks, and riveting the skin together as they went along. Pretty amazing. You could not do it today. U.S. government would not let you do a project like that. And even more remarkable, of all the people who worked on that, not a single fatality. You look at that and you think somebody had to die. Nobody did. Not a single fatality. In fact, when you think about the Brooklyn Bridge, with 27 men losing their lives building the Brooklyn Bridge, and then none on the Statue of Liberty, it really is pretty remarkable. So the Statue of Liberty is built. It only took 4 months to build the Statue of Liberty, mostly with immigrant labor. So it's October of 1886. Time to have a celebration. Time to have a party. So they had a big opening ceremony. And they invited Grover Cleveland up from Washington, D.C. He was the President of the United States, to make opening remarks. Lots of fireworks. Big time party. They did something very politically incorrect. They did not invite women. Would you believe there were only 2 women of the thousands who were there, several thousand, probably between 2,000 and 3,000 people, there on Liberty Island, Bedloe's Island at the time, for the opening ceremony? There were 2 women. One was Bartholdi's wife. The other was the 13-year-old daughter of one of the engineers who worked on the project. That was it. New York City women took that as a slap in the face. They said, here's, first of all, a statue of a woman. Second, she's supposed to be representing liberty, and we do not have the liberty to vote. So they got a little protest together. I say little, that's an understatement. They hired ferries, and they trolled the island, circled the island in the ferries with megaphones shouting down the President of the United States to register their unhappiness with the fact that this representation of a woman representing liberty, and there are only 2 women, and one of them is 13 years old, on the island for the opening ceremony. So New York women can be feisty. Believe me, I know. I married one, so I know how feisty they can be, and God bless them. Okay? So that's the story of the construction of the statue. And I've covered pretty much most of what you probably need to know. I think a couple of interesting stories that you may not have been aware of before. There's one more thing I want to talk about before we decide what time we're going to catch the ferry and give you some time on your own. Okay, come on down here.
There she is, waving and cheering. Remember that? Somebody was breathing. And I
have to compete a bit here with the voices of immigrants. These are recorded voices of immigrants talking about their first glimpse of the statue when they were coming to the country. So again, if you have trouble hearing me, let me know. But the last person I want to bring to your attention is somebody whose name you may not know, but she had a huge impact on the history of the statue. And her name was Emma Lazarus. You can see her picture in the upper left, up here, your right. That's Emma Lazarus, a young woman who wrote a poem, a sonnet, in 1883 called The New Colossus. and it contained those now famous words, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." Well, unfortunately, Emma Lazarus never really understood, never got to know how important those words would become, because about a year after the statue was built, she died of cancer. She was only 38 years old. But those words have become famous, and they have come to represent the spirit of the United States in welcoming immigrants into our country. This plaque was the first recognition of that poem. It was put on the statue, on the front side of the statue in 1903, and then it stayed there until 1986. When they built the museum here in 1986, they took it down and they put it here in the museum because it was easier for people to see it rather than going out in front of the statue. So Emma Lazarus, again, she was only 38 years old when she died. Okay, if we can move down here a little bit, we'll make a decision about this over there. Unless you want to explain. Right up to the bridge.
Khi lòng nhớ thêm dòng đời là chuỗi tiếc nhớ, mơ vui là lúc nghìn đắng cay sẽ tâm hồn. Tàn đêm tôi khóc khi trời mưa buồn hắt hiu, lòng mình thầm nhớ dĩ vãng, đau thương tựa lúc vừa bước chân vào đường yêu. Đêm ấy mưa rơi nhiều, giọt mưa tan tác mưa mùa ngâu, tiễn chân người đi buồn che đôi mắt thấm ướt khi biệt ly. Nghe tim mình giá buốt, hồi còi xe nát không xa, xót thương vô vàn nhìn theo bóng tàu dần khuất trong màn đêm. Mùa thu thương nhớ bao lần đi về cố đôi, mà người còn vắng bóng mãi, hay xuyên nồng thắm ngày ấy nay đã phai rồi. Từ lâu tôi biết câu thời gian là thuốc tiên, đời việc gì đến sẽ đến, nhưng ai bạc béo mình vẫn không đành lòng quên. Giọt mưa tan tác mưa mùa ngâu, tiễn chân người đi buồn che đôi mắt thấm ướt khi biệt ly. Nghe tim mình giá buốt, hồi còi xe nát không gian, xót thương vô vàn nhìn theo bóng tàu dần khuất trong màn đêm. Mùa thu thương nhớ bao lần đi về có đôi, mà người còn vắng bóng mãi, hay xuyên nồng thắm ngày ấy nay lâu. Tôi biết có thời gian là thuốc tiên, đợi việc gì đến sẽ đến. Nhưng ai bạc béo mình vẫn không đành lòng quên. Nhưng ai bạc béo mình vẫn không đành lòng quên.
Chiều tàn trời man mác, nắng thơm lành đã dần phai. Màn đêm sao chưa buông còn thơ thẫn, tựa đời mong bóng ai. Bóng đôi chim non tìm đường về, ngại ngùng tung cánh theo làn gió đông vừa sang. Hay cô thôn quê lòng rộn ràng, nhịp nhàng quang gánh trong lòng bóng đêm dần lan. Chiều tàn làn khói ấm mái tranh hiên bao niềm thương. Gió không biên cương tìm đường về, tràn vào ngõ tối qua mảnh lá nghe thơ than. Gió thương những mảnh tình nghèo nàn, cuộc đời đen tối mong hạnh phúc khi chiều lan. Đường gập ghềnh lạnh lẽo, quanh co đường về khắp nẻo xa xôi. Có bóng con đò chiều mơ, khách qua đò làm thơ. Êm trôi giữa trời nước bơ vơ, nhẹ nhàng thuyền cập bến. Dòng sông nước lững lờ, kia không gian như thơ. Cô em thẫn thờ nhìn áng mây trôi, lắng nghe chung chiều mà lòng thương nhớ ai nhiều. Chiều tàn đời lữ thứ kiếp tơ tằm vẫn còn mang. Chuỗi ngày nghèo nàn, tìm lại giây phút đôi lòng chết theo thời gian. Cố ghi thêm ý nhạc nồng nàn, vì tình thương mến dâng về khắp nơi trần gian. Gập ghềnh lạnh lẽo, quanh co đường về khắp nẻo xa xôi. Có bóng con đò chiều mơ, khách qua đò làm thơ. Êm trôi giữa trời nước thờ, nhìn áng mây trôi, lắng nghe chuông chiều mà lòng thương nhớ ai nhiều. Chiều tàn đời lữ thứ kiếp tơ tằm vẫn còn mang. Chiều ấy ghi tâm tư vào lòng giấy, rằng sầu mãi chưa chan. Cố quên những chuỗi ngày nghèo nàn, tìm lại giây phút đôi lòng chết theo thời gian. Cố ghi thêm ý nhạc nồng nàn, vì tình thương mến dâng về khắp nơi trần gian. Cố ghi thêm ý nhạc nồng nàn, vì tình thương mến dâng về khắp nơi trần gian.